Today I'm going to demonstrate manual knit weaving on the Superba knitting machine, and I will do it by making this dishcloth. Manual knit weaving is used in several of the spiffy Swiffer socks, so I particularly wanted to be sure that Superba, White, and Singer knitters are included. The book includes 8 Swiffer sock patterns, and of those, 3 include weaving, and it can be done manually. Here are the necessary settings. The needle return levers should be set so they will knit stitches that are pushed all the way forward. Needles that are pushed all the way forward into hold position. Use a larger stitch size than you'd normally use for the yarn. This is number 1 yarn, and I am knitting it at stitch size 9, whereas I'd normally use 7. The large stitch size is for 2 reasons. 1, much easier to knit weave with the larger, thicker yarn we're using as the weaving yarn, and 2, porosity is a good quality for the fabric of a dishcloth. Engage the button that is with the upside down V symbol so as to knit ordinary stockinette. Use any neat cast on and bind off that you like. I used a doubly wrapped cast on without any waste yarn. I will show you how to do that in another movie. Today we'll focus on the weaving, since you can make this using any cast on. My cloth is made with 2 different scrubbing textured yarns. The first half is Red Heart Scrubby. The second half, which becomes the other side of the cloth, is Mary Maxim Scrub It. An alternative to the Red Heart Scrubby is Premier Washi, which has quite a similar texture and behavior. Unless you have the special knitting retainer attachment, you will of course need weights, whether in waste yarn or directly on the comb. Start off knitting normally with 3 plain rows, then stop and work a weaving row, and we will weave every 3rd row. To weave, lower the front bed, then begin by going over the outer 3 needles, under the next 3, over the next 3, under the next, and so on, all the way across the bed, always doing it in the same manner. The weaving yarn comes from between the beds up and always is woven over the first 3 and under the second 3 needles. Bring the front bed up and knit 3 rows. While it's not being used, just let the weaving yarn hang down between the beds, making sure that it has cleared the needles. Knit 3 rows, and then we'll repeat. We'll fish out the weaving yarn from where it is, over 3, under 3, across. Always starting in that manner and having 40 needles is what creates the faintly diamond-looking pattern. In effect, because we have an even number of stitches that is not divisible by 3, and we are going over and under 3, we are affecting the patterning, and that's what creates the diamond. After wrapping the row, it's really important to push the weaving yarn back as far towards the combs on the machine, towards the back bed, as you possibly can. The first row after weaving is going to be stiff, but that pushing avoids jams. After each weaving row, knit 3 rows. Repeat this action until 57 rows have been knitted. Work the final weaving row of the first yarn after knitting row 57. This time knit 6 rows before working the next weaving row, and when we do go to the next weaving row, we'll do it with the second yarn. If you began with the locks on the right, they're probably on the left now. So the new yarn comes up from between the beds on the left, and then we resume doing the same thing with it we've been doing with the other yarn. Over 3, under 3, all the way across. Scrub It yarn has quite a different texture, and it's made out of different material than scrubby yarn. So it's sort of the best of both worlds to get 2 different scrubbing surfaces. The construction of the yarn is different enough that when I first tried it, I thought it wasn't going to weave very well on standard gauge machines, including Superba, but it surprised me. It's softer than the other yarn, and even though it's got a wider footprint, it does just fine. Also, it does have smaller hairs, and that helps. But as you just saw, the first row after wrapping can be quite stiff. The way to minimize that is to be really careful about pushing back the yarn after the wrapping and make certain that it's not caught on the flow combs. There you go. Knit until row 117 is complete, and then do one final weaving wrap. Knit 3 more plain rows to finish up. Now remove the comb and the weights, lower the beds, lift up the cast-on edge, and hang it on the working needles. I find it easiest to first hang both ends and then hang all the work in between. What you're aiming at is getting one of the double E wraps with which we started, or whatever your cast-on was, on each needle evenly across. I very frequently use my left hand to unroll the edge and my right hand to push the needle butt forward and catch the stitch or the cast-on the hook. But a prong tool is also a time-honored way of doing it. Does not matter at all, just do what works the best for you. After this, bind off or knit one row and bind off. It won't matter which you do. At the moment, the weaving is on the inside, so turn it so it's on the outside, and you just got a nice look at the seam that we created while binding off. Snip all the yarn ends and tuck them between the layers, and that way they won't unravel, but we don't have to weave them in either. They can be left 3 to 4 inches long. All that's left is to align the edges, whip stitch them together, keeping all of the yarn tails to the inside. I have found that a doubled length of the main yarn does a good job of this, and you can make certain everything stays properly aligned by checking the edges as you work and whip stitching every 3 rows, joining the stripes of weaving yarn. Because we worked with a lot of weights, originally the piece of fabric will have looked very long, but it should come out very close to square once it's finished. Here's the table of contents for the Spiffy Swiffer Covers book, in case it interests you. Not shown, but included in the book, is a 3-page section on Superba notes to make sure you understand how to accomplish all of the patterns. I will place a link to the book in the program notes.